You're got about 400% more people here than we expected tonight. That's very, very good to see. Thank you all for coming out. My name is Billy Townsend. I am a dude who lives in town, and I have become interested and supportive of the executive mayor form of government, and this is sort of our kickoff night. What we're trying to do is, this right now is an idea that we're trying to build some structure and momentum around, and so this is both a discussion meeting to take some questions from all of you and try to provide some answers, and also to recruit as many of you as would like to get involved. And so before we start, I want to introduce my fellow panelists up here. This is Florida Southern College Professor Bruce Anderson. I'd like Bruce to tell you guys a little bit about himself and how he came to this.
I got involved in this after, actually shortly after the last mayoral election. I wrote an op-ed piece for the Ledger. They raised the question of changing city government, growth of Lakeland, growth of Lakeland industry, growth of business in Lakeland, and so on. And they said, can business operate under the current system? And so I ranted on the page for a little bit about the fact that what we really lacked was a strong mayor. And that was my beginning. But I'm a political scientist, and my technical expertise actually is what kind of brings me to this. When cities reach a certain size, you need to look at the way that they govern themselves and the way that they make their plans for the future. And in almost every case, we found that cities that go over to an elected mayor with real powers tend to do better. They tend to do better than those on the commission system.
And I would just echo my path has kind of followed that as well. I was originally opposed to this idea when I thought of it in abstract terms, and then I started to read about other cities comparable to us and how they have followed more decisive direction by having this form of government. And Bruce says, it's not a unanimous thing, but if you look at the type of cities we want to be, they all tend to have the strong mayor, executive mayor form of government. Just some quick housekeeping things. We have some water over there in the corner. Don't know if we have enough for everybody, because again, there's a lot more of you than we expected, which is good. And there is the bathrooms are outside if you need. We've got the room from 6 to 8. I can't imagine that we're going to go till 8. But if anybody's here, they still have questions and want to talk to us and want to sign up and work with us, we'll stay as long as you guys want to. And now to sort of kick things off, I want to introduce you to Matt Doster. Matt is our hired gun from out of town, who is helping to organize both the legal and policy underpinnings of the plan, and to sort of help build the structure that we're talking about. And Matt's going to take you through just a little bit of a quick presentation talk about where things stand, what we're trying to do, and after that we'll kind of go right to questions. So,
thank you, Billy, and looking forward to this conversation. If everybody would indulge me, I'm just sort of curious, how did you hear about this meeting? If you heard about it from, let's say, email, raise your hand. About 6, okay. If you heard about this from Facebook, raise your hand. Okay. And if you heard about this from the Lakeland Ledger, raise your hand. Ooh.
Score one for old media right there.
For mainstream journalism. There you go. And then anybody else that didn't hear from those 3, but maybe just word of mouth. Okay, a couple. Okay. Very good. Oh, that's some good feedback. So as Billy said, my name is Matt Doster, and I've been working on this for a couple of months. It's been a very educational process for me. I'm getting to know the city of Lakeland better. I kind of knew it a little bit already, but not nearly as well as I think I know it now. All of you, if you're Lakeland residents or natives, are going to know it better than I do, so I'm looking forward to get some education as I continue to go through it. Billy and Bruce here obviously have a lot of depth of knowledge of what the city's been going through, and there's a lot of elected officials or former elected officials here, former staff that can speak to a lot of these issues as well. What I'm going to do is go through a PowerPoint, and unfortunately I'm the only one that gets to see it. I'm just using it basically as notes, but it was from a presentation I gave before, and we didn't really want to make this too formal, so I just want to use it as notes, and I'll go through and describe basically the structure of what a citizen's petition would look like here in the city of Lakeland. And just speaking generally, Florida statutes guarantee the right of any city to petition to change their charter. So any city, 10% of the voters can sign petitions, ask for an amendment to charter, and pretty much the state statute and constitution guarantees that that would happen. The mechanics of how that happen are a little bit different from city to city. Lakeland has some prescribed methodologies in the city charter and the city code that would apply in this situation, and I can get into that a little bit. But basically, the fundamental issue is that the citizens of a city can petition to change their charter. And in this case, there has been a conversation about strong mayor, or as we say, executive mayor. There's been a conversation around this for many, many years, and I was looking at an article from the Lakeland Ledger from 1985 in which this was debated, and Bill Ruffey wrote the article, and it's been debated and brought up and died down and brought back up again. I think there's been a lot of interest in it in the last few years. Some people may think this is a new idea for Lakeland. It's certainly not a new idea for Lakeland, but it certainly has gotten a little bit more steam lately, and I think there's a lot of interest in it. So the basic process that I was referring to is guaranteed by in Florida statute. A committee comes to the city of Lakeland, has a proposed change to the charter, goes through some legal steps with the city clerk and the city attorney, and then begins to collect signatures with a petition. This is a very standard process. A lot of other things, constitutional amendments to the Florida Constitution can happen this way through citizens petition. People can qualify on the ballot to run for election by citizens petition. It's a pretty standard format for many different political processes. In our case, the thing that we're trying to emphasize is that it's really not about strong mayor or weak mayor or executive mayor or city manager or council manager form of government. The real center of this debate or this idea is the city of Lakeland. It's about a strong Lakeland. So we chose a name that we hope reflects that. We really believe that it's about a strong Lakeland. And there are differences of opinion about how you get to a strong city, but we believe that this form of government is very beneficial for that. What we're finding is we're looking at other cities, Pensacola, St. Petersburg, West Palm Beach, some other cities that have changed to a executive mayor form of government. A lot of times people have in mind that it depends on what the size of the city is. That's kind of a driving factor about the form of government. And there is some truth to that. The probably closer theme that we like to look in on is how dynamic a city is. If the city's changing, if it's growing, if it's reinventing itself, if it's looking at opportunities, a lot of times these forms of government where you have an executive that is accountable to the people through the political process, a lot of times that is a very effective form of government for those sorts of cities. Just some quick data tidbits for your interest. Florida has a lot of unincorporated area, so if you look at the state of Florida and you ask do people live in cities or they live out of cities in unincorporated areas, it's half and half. About 10 million people live out of cities and about 9.8 million people live in cities. Those cities, for the most part, have one of 4 different forms of government. Council, weak mayor, council, strong mayor, as they say, League of Cities says, commission form of government, or a council manager form of government. And the city of Lakeland has a council manager form of government right now. Our proposal would fit into the League of Cities terminology of a strong mayor or what we call executive mayor. some more data tidbits, if you look at how many cities have the different forms of government, about 2/3 of the cities in Florida have council manager form of government, about 270. The strong mayor form of government is about 50 cities, 49 to be exact. They're throughout the state of Florida, all different sizes, and represent about 25% of the population of Florida. So when you talk about the office of mayor, sometimes there's some confusion, or some people have their own preconceived notions of what that means. To us, the real key difference is whether the mayor votes on the city commission or whether the mayor is an executive that runs the city or has some sort of an executive function. And in the council manager form of government, even with an elected mayor like we have here in Lakeland, the mayor is still basically in a legislative position. The mayor still votes on the city commission, considers ordinances and tax increases and tax cuts and all those sorts of things, just in the same way that all the other city commissioners do. So while the title mayor and sometimes the presumptions of what that mayor might be able to do, sort of follow with that title, the actual function of that person is more of a legislative function. And then the other side of that coin would be a non-voting member of the city commission, a mayor who actually has executive day-to-day duties. And in that situation, you could have a mayor with a city manager. The model city charter refers to that. That title is chief administrative officer, but basically you still have a senior staff person who's a professional who has experience in municipal government. So why do we call it executive mayor? Why is that important to us? The reason is because I think when you hear strong, you assume that maybe there's some sort of excess of power that gets pooled into one person. And the fact of the matter is it's really a separation of power. It's the idea that one elected person would have executive responsibility and not vote on the city commission on legislative matters, and that the city commissioners would really be that legislative body. And when you consider it in that context, I guess, the city commission retains an enormous amount of responsibility, one to be a check and a balance on the power of the mayor. And you see this in other forms of government. We're very familiar with this separation idea in federal and state government. It's the way that those forms of government tend to be organized. So we know about presidents and governors who have executive power, and then they have checks and balances on that power from the legislative body. And so to us, we didn't want to emphasize strong as this idea that you're moving all this power to one person, but that you're taking that same authority and responsibility and separating it, and you're separating it for a reason. Another term that some of the policy folks use for the way that Lakeland's government works now, they'll call it a unified government, meaning that the city commissioners have responsibility both for executive and for legislative issues. And an example of a unified government would be British Parliament, for example. So what we're doing, and what I've been doing the last couple of months, we've been talking to a lot of people, having a lot of one-on-one conversations, trying to get as much feedback, talking to city elected officials, talking to various stakeholders throughout the community, and really trying to get as much feedback as we can about what people think is working or isn't working in Lakeland government. And we're in the process of writing a first draft of a Lakeland charter, and we're on a third variation of that first draft. And every time I talk to people, they say, when am I going to see this draft? And I promise you, when you see the draft, it's not going to be nearly as exciting as you think it is. There is an FAQ document on our website. I would encourage anybody to see it. It's a website, stronglakeland.com, if you haven't been there already. The FAQ document lays out very much in substance the ideas that we're pursuing. There are a few things that aren't quite confirmed or concluded upon. Hopefully this meeting will be a way for us to get some feedback from all of you, and that very well may influence some of those issues that we're still wrestling with. But the basic theme is this separation of power, given the office of mayor executive responsibility and not legislative. This is our first meeting of this format, and we're going to have more. Billy has set up a couple other meetings, and we're going to be doing these over the next few weeks. So if you don't get all your questions answered this time, or if you have friends, family, whatever, that would like to come to the next one, we'll keep you apprised about when those meetings are.
Those will both be at the Larry Jackson branch library on August 10th and September 14th. And we'll continue to have sort of regular strategy discussion meetings as we move forward. And we'll send out notifications as well. Sorry to cut that.
Absolutely. So, in a little bit more detail, some of the checks and balances that typically happen in this form of government, while a lot of the duties that would currently be with the city manager become assumed by the elected mayor. The city commission in this sort of format would have the power to veto, the mayor would have the power to veto legislation that the city commission or ordinances, and then the commission would have the power to override a veto. Very similar to what you would see with a governor legislative kind of a relationship.
Do we have an opinion on whether that's 5-2 or 6-1 yet?
I'd love to get feedback on that. I mean, you can kind of make these numbers, whatever people feel are the strongest priorities. There are debates about which is more efficient or better. A little bit higher threshold is seen as keeping really a streamlined form of government able to move forward, but that's something that we're considering, and we'd love to get your feedback on that. The other aspect that we envision is that the commission would approve key personnel with the city of Lakeland, somewhat similar to what you might have with the Senate confirming cabinet heads or something like that in some of the other forms of government. So, for instance, some of the titles that have been mentioned: city attorney, city clerk, two very important positions that would probably be for approval by the commission, the general manager of the utility, and actually the electric utility is something that we've gotten a lot of feedback on, that people want to make sure it continues to be managed by the commission and by that general manager the way it is now, and we agree with that. So, the mayor's duties would be to set the strategic direction of the city, to administer to the day-to-day operations, hire and fire, do all those sorts of things that you would expect the chief executive to do. The commission would continue to raise or cut your taxes, handle financial matters, bonding, all that sort of thing, pass or repeal ordinances, including the budget, and continue to act as trustees for the key assets of the city, utilities, airport, lands, etc. One of the interesting wrinkles is that if the elected mayor becomes an executive and no longer a voter on the city commission, then what happens to that vote? What happens to that vote that the mayor was exercising before? And in the spirit of maintaining representation the way it is today, I think most people have said they would like to see that position, an at-large commissioner position, there to replace what the mayor's vote was. So you would have basically 4 district commissioners and 3 at-large commissioners. Some other sort of ramifications of this kind of a change, you would have, maybe the mayor pro tem position would no longer be relevant. You would have some considerations about the succession of the mayor should the mayor resign or be incapacitated in some way. So those are some other sort of minor details, but important details to be considered. Most of the people I've talked to on that front have said they like the idea of an elected person being at least the temporary mayor if there's some time period where a mayor was not able to serve. So that's another consideration.
What about term limits?
Term limits. It's the next bullet on my slide. Pretty good.
So you can tell how closely aligned we are. I'm sorry.
So term limits. I have gotten some feedback from people who have had an appetite to tweak or somehow look at those term limits. It's a good question. I don't think there's a good answer, or there's not an easy answer. I think the gut reaction that we've had as we've been having these conversations is to change as little as needs to in order to affect this change that people are asking for. but that, you know, it's another area that we'd love to get some feedback on. A lot of the why I'm going to leave to Billy and Bruce in this presentation I'd given earlier. I did have a slide on that, but I'll skip it for now, and we can get into that in some of the Q&A. Some of the resources that we've used, there's three that I like to tell people about. One is the book More Than Mayor or Manager. It's a really good policy book. It's a little dry reading unless this is something that you just really have a passion for, but it is a great resource. It looks at, I think it's 14 different cities, and it looks at cities that have done a little bit, you know, there's basically every combination of possibility. So cities that were council manager that went strong mayor, or vice versa, or cities that wanted to and did it, or wanted to and didn't do it. It gives you a lot of good insight into what some of these other cities' experiences have been. Another book is The Seamless City by Rick Baker, who's the former mayor of St. Petersburg, and he's really been kind of a leader on some urban policy issues in the state of Florida and throughout the country for that matter. But a very good book about his vision for St. Petersburg and how he went about it. He was in the position of actually opposing the idea of a strong mayor for St. Petersburg, it passing, and then him being part of the team that implemented it, and then he ultimately ran for mayor and became mayor himself. So he has a very interesting perspective on it. And then finally, the Model City Charter, which I think you're going to hear more about later this week. Model City Charter has a preference for council manager form of government, but they have a very good section in that document that that discusses the pros and cons and what are the best kinds of situations for mayors with executive authority. And I've got that list if anybody wants to get it later. I'm happy to share that with you. So the rest of my slides, I've got some of the arguments for and against these forms of government. I'll save that for now. We can get into some of that in the Q&A. Some of the other people that we've talked to, this is again kind of an FYI, I guess, who have had a lot of good insight. There's a gentleman named Tom Murphy, who's the former mayor of Pittsburgh with the Urban Land Institute. He's got a lot of great insight into urban situations and urban leadership. Rick Baker, who I mentioned, Mayor Bob Buckhorn from Tampa, who I think a lot of people in this room have talked to. I've heard a lot of good feedback about visits that the city has had with his office. The mayor of Pensacola, Ashton Hayward, had a good conversation with the mayor of Ocala, Kent Gwynn. Kelly Kirshner, who's the former mayor of Sarasota, and Manny Sid, who's the vice mayor of Miami Lakes. So we've been getting some outside perspective too. Ultimately, though, the theme that I think really needs to be emphasized is that Lakeland knows what's best for Lakeland. This is a city that will decide its own course. We would like there to be a vote, and that they would have an opportunity to have a vote, that the city would have a vote on this form of government. And we believe whatever that vote is the direction of the city, because it's really at the heart and the core of representative government here in this country, that the citizens would be able to choose that direction for themselves. So really, whatever the outcome is, we consider it'll be a success one way or the other, because the citizens will be the ones who make that decision. I've got probably a lot more I could cover, but I think for right now, probably kick it back to Billy and Bruce, and we can do Q&A or however you want to proceed from this point.
Well, why don't we just we've talked for a while now, and I think our whys will come up as we go. Why don't we let you guys start off with some questions?
I got a question.
Sir.
Am I correct in saying the city commission could do this with all the signatures, put it on the ballot?
The city commission could do it without signatures.
They could just vote 4-3?
Well, they could put it on the ballot.
Right.
If the city commission chose to, they could do that, yes.
So otherwise, you got to do a lot of work and get a lot of people move inertia. You have to move inertia and get something happen.
There's two paths to put it on the ballot. I'll just say that.
Let me ask you one more question. When you were explaining the different forms of government, is the city commission supposed to rein in the executive mayor?
Rein in, you mean? I mean, in terms of the checks and balances, it's certain the intent and the form of government is intended for both sides to balance each other. I mean, I don't rein in. I'm not sure.
Well, something inappropriate going on.
Absolutely.
Or cronyism or whatever,
There should be-
something like
right,
that.
There should be oversight in both
But
directions.
if, you know, it sounds very similar to the situation now where you've got a city manager and the commission's supposed to rein it in. So just because you have that new form of government, do we have any confidence that the city commission will rein in the executive mayor?
I have a lot of confidence that the people will rein in the executive mayor, and that's you really hit on the difference. We have two layers then of check and balance. The city commission, you know, they evaluate the city manager position today. Do you remember any account that's been given of how they evaluated him or her or whatever? You don't. You will get a chance every 4 years to evaluate the performance of the executive mayor emphatically with your vote. While there's also underlying the same checks and balances that exist now will exist with the city commission. They will have the right to raise or lower taxes. They will have the right to do all the ordinances that they do now, and all that's going to change is you're going to make the equivalent of the city manager position more directly accountable to a public direction.
That's good, because it seems like the city commission lets the city manager do whatever he wants right now.
Something that you very rarely see with the legislature allowing a governor to do very much. I think that the point that Bill's trying to make is that what you have is a legislative function in the commission that is present currently, but very, very much dormant. With an executive mayor, when you have someone sitting at the top that actually does have power to do things like veto or force legislation or something like that, you're going to have a much more active commission when it comes to passing ordinances or granting, certain kinds of variances and things like that.
Right. I mean, one of the things I've said is the dormancy is a very good way to put it. Right now, you kind of have 7 weak mayors. No offense to anybody who's on the commission. They're all elected by the whole city. They all have their own agendas, which is completely a legitimate thing for them to have, and yet they're all going in this kind of direction. So when you have an elected executive who can set the direction, they will then organize around that person, either to support or to thwart or to help guide the direction of the city.
I think we're probably most familiar with strong mayors in Tampa, with Buckhorn, Kreisman, and St. Petersburg, and perhaps Orlando, Freddie Dyer as well. And we have the issue, say, of Tropicana Field. The Mayor Kreisman wanted to negotiate 4 or 5 on the commission didn't, so they're at a standstill right now. Are all those forms, since we're vaguely familiar with those, do they all have the same form of strong mayor? There's some unique variations of them. You said Rick Baker, who was mayor, was against it. So did he put some wrinkles, or did they put some wrinkles in to limit the power a little bit?
Those two cities are fairly similar. There are a couple of cities in Florida where there is an executive mayor who continues to vote on the commission. Not those two, but Orlando and Apopka are 2 examples of cities where that's the case. Almost everybody we've talked to kind of urban policy type folks, or the documents we've read, most recommendations are against that because they feel like it just undermines the theme of what you're trying to do. Now, 2 interesting variations between Tampa and St. Petersburg. Neither mayor votes on the city commission, but the mayor of St. Petersburg frequently attends those city commission meetings, participates in them, may do some ceremonial functions at those types of meetings, whereas Mayor Buckhorn in Tampa makes almost a point of pride that he only goes to the meeting once a year, and it's when he presents the budget, his proposed budget. So every city has a little bit of a variation. The city of St. Petersburg, what we understand, it was kind of a let me choose my words carefully. It was maybe not as well thought through as what we're trying to do in terms of how that charter revision was proposed. And so what they said literally is it was kind of a strike and replace type job. City manager got crossed out and mayor got written in. And they actually had the situation where they did not account for the vote that the mayor had previously had on the commission, so they went from 9 votes to 8 votes. And then they had tie votes because they had the 4-4 situation. Tie votes aren't the end of the world because all it means is that the measure doesn't pass, whatever is being considered, but there is some kind of mathematical regularity if it can be an even number and you don't have to deal with that. And so anytime, I think in the city of St. Petersburg, they did have to come back and do some glitch fixes, so to speak. As far as the particular case with the Tropicana field, I'm not an expert on that, so I can't speak to that specific example. But you're right, and there's no city in Florida with a strong mayor system. There's no city that has the exact same charter. Every charter is a little bit different.
Can I add one thing to that, though, Randy? I think the cities I'm most interested in aren't even in Florida. They're Greenville, South Carolina. They're Chattanooga, Tennessee. They're Duluth, Minnesota. They're cities that are more comparable to our size and our sort of ambition. And I've read a lot about. There's a national reporter for The Atlantic named James Fallows, who's done for the last 2 years. He's been flying around from city to city, all cities about our size, and looking at what works and what doesn't work. And the project he's done is called American Futures. Chris, you should tweet that. And it's a really good resource for looking at how this stuff works on the ground. And that's largely his reporting and his work is largely what changed my mind, because he started to talk about it in action. And he's a really smart, honest guy. So I think a lot of the sort of mid-sized cities that are where we are, that made the decision to do what we're hoping to do, have seen that have really successful results.
Is Duluth different than the ones here? Do they have a different model than
the precise mechanics of them, I can't tell you. It's the rough executive mayor function. So I think Bob had his hand up in the back. I'm sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
Yeah, as a political comparison, how is this different from when we went from an elected school superintendent with a board to abolishing the elected superintendent and hiring that superintendent, which is the system that we, on the surface, appear to have now? We have a commission which hires someone. And my understanding is that a strong mayor would probably have to hire a manager. And in that case, my opinion would be you're adding that mayor's going to have to be full-time and have a salary, and you're going to have a manager who's going to be full-time and have a salary, and yeah, you're adding a layer. But I see that one person, rather than 7, is going to be looking at only what he or she wants to do and not what other people. I believe in committees.
There's a 2-part question. You want to take that out?
Yeah, let me just talk for just a second about sort of the differences between these two kinds of systems and what they're designed to do. The school board with the superintendent, elected superintendent, makes a lot of sense if you have tremendous community input into a relatively small system. What you're trying to do is to deal with, a growing number of students, a growing number of schools, and so on and so forth. You move from the area when you need someone who is trusted by the community, trusted by the people that are served by the schools, and so on and so forth, but probably doesn't know a heck of a lot about how the schools actually work, to the need for someone that has a tremendous technical expertise in the area of education. When you're talking about cities, it actually kind of moves in the other direction, and that is that you want maybe you're willing to settle for a little less technical expertise for a lot more vision. Whereas vision may not work as well, particularly in school districts in Florida, as it would when you have a larger system. You really need that technical expertise. So you're really making a trade-off. There are 2 systems that are designed to do 2 very different things. One is to manage a school system, and the other is to see through a city into its future over the next 8 years or 10 years or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. And think of it this way: you wouldn't want to elect the the operational chief of your army. I mean, obviously the president is the person you elect, but an army has a very specific function. You appoint a very person with huge military experience. That's sort of a narrow, technically focused thing. He doesn't say what the army is going to do. Whereas the analogy to a city is you got to decide what the elements you want them to do. I'm not explaining this well, but what the school board does, what an army does, what Lakeland Electric does, are very narrow, technically focused things. There aren't as many political choices to be made in the leadership of them, and I think in the leadership of a city, there are a million political choices. There are a million interests to balance all the time. I think that's why an elected approach makes more sense.
Boards of education also are answerable to state forces over which they have utterly no control. Right. Cities very rarely are. But.
In the back?
Well, if we have a strong mayor, that's going to be acting very much like our city manager does in much of the capacity. We have an assistant city manager and a deputy county manager. Would there be any need, would we even consider in the charter to have a third position that oversees those two positions that already exist?
Well, I mean, what? I mean, nowhere is it written that you would need either of those positions. I mean, you might need them. It's going to be up to the person who's elected to decide how his or her administration will work. And I think there's a very good chance. Bob is right. You will almost certainly hire a chief administrative officer, but that chief administrative officer may be able to reduce 3 or 4 positions somewhere else. I mean, I don't think. You have to see it in totality, and certainly there will be a political reward for doing your job efficiently, I would think.
Yeah, the aim is not to grow a bureaucracy. The aim is to reduce the bureaucracy and to put a smaller distance between those that are in power and those that they answer to, not to gain all these buffers. The buffers are in part what's kind of wrong with Lakeland right now.
Yeah, I could completely agree with that. I mean, your elected officials.
Yeah, I think the aim of this is to shorten the distance between the public, the people that live in Lakeland, the citizens like you and me that live here, and the people that are guiding the future of Lakeland. And part of the problem, as I see it, just from a political science point of view, is there are too many unelected buffers between the people and the people that are running the vision end. The vision end is also gridlocked because of the way that our commission has come to work. Not that anyone intends it to work this way, but the way that system is designed, when it was designed and when it was implemented, it made good sense. What you don't want in a small city that really isn't growing very much and that is very stable and so on and so forth is a lot of change. You don't want somebody that will come in and uproot things and start changing things and all this sort of thing. Right now, we are poised between Orlando and Tampa as the biggest growth area in Florida. And in order to, I think, to take on the responsibility of doing that, we have to be responsive to the way that the people in Lakeland want to see us go forward. Going forward is not a choice. How we go forward very much is a choice. And that has to come from the people here. It cannot come from unelected officials. The other thing that I see as problematic is that when businesses come to our doorstep and try to come to the city and plant themselves here, they run into a maze of bureaucracy, which is tremendously stultifying if you're looking at it from the point of view of somebody from the outside. What we want to see is something that shortens that distance for that person coming to the city for the first time as well. If they need a special water district or a special electrical district or a variance or something like that, they should be able to get those things with a minimum of bureaucratic hassle. And I think this system probably serves that much better than the current system does.
And I think as people talk about the different branches of government, the legislative branch, which is the commission, and the executive branch, which would be this, they miss the fact in our current government that staff is its own branch of government right now, and it's you don't elect it, and I promise you, the current city manager position is much more powerful today than the elected executive mayor position would be. In the real world, that's just a fact. I think, and that's, I think if you think of staff as a branch of government, and look, I like staff. I mean, my wife is arguably staff in one way or another. But it's the bridge that your elected officials are supposed to be between the public will and results is not functioning very well right now. We're trying to build a better bridge between them. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
My name is Dietrich, and I'm probably the only one in this room that's gone through this. And I prevented it from happening. I've been here 13 years. I love a city in Nevada called Mesquite. They want to do the same thing. My old daddy always said, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. I love Lakeland. Been here 13 years, I'm probably going to die here. We've got the best police department in the state. We've got the best fire department in the state. We've got the best electric company, best hospitals, the best manager as far as getting things done. Look at our streets, look at our sidewalks. I just came back from Georgia last week, went through 3 or 4 states. Nothing like this. You're talking about a mayor and governor, a mayor of cities. Let's take a look at a few cities that have a mayor. Chicago, St. Louis, Baltimore, New York. I go on and on. Mayor of Baltimore told the police department to stand down while rioting and killings going on. You wouldn't have that happen here. You'd have to have 7 people decide to do that, and there'd be no way. My community within the city here, we just partitioned the city, and if we'd had a mayor, we wouldn't have got the new fire department, new fire station. They listened. There were 7 of them listening. We had a mayor form of government, we wouldn't have got that new fire department. And guess what's happening now since that new fire department? Go along Drainfield Road, go along County Road. They're building like crazy now. Why? Because they can get insurance now, fire insurance. We were number 4 over there in that section. We're number 1 now. So they can build all these, like roofing, public, they're doing all this building, they're saving huge amounts of money on the insurance because of that fire station. It's the best fire station probably in the state.
Did you
Because
support the fire fee?
I'm sorry?
Did you support the fire fee?
Did I support it? That's where it wouldn't have been built. It was built 2 to 3 years ahead of schedule. Because if we had a mayor form, the mayor would have decided, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe 1 life or 2 lives aren't worth $1 million or $2 million. That's a mistake. With 7 people that go home to their communities every night, they have to face their neighbors. We've got 7 of them, and we're very fortunate. We've got 7 very good ones.
Well, you would still have 7 of them. They wouldn't go anywhere. You would still have all 7. They would still go home to their communities. You
They
could
wouldn't
still
have the same
petition.
power under a mayor form. And I will tell you, if this goes forward, I will do exactly what I did in Mesquite. You'll have a charter, and I'll have one too. And that way, neither one of them, and it will remain exactly like it was. Because I'll rewrite it, and I did. I had a couple of things right in my home, cost nothing. The other side, your side, let's say, spent tens of thousands of dollars. I spent nothing. In fact, I even got a casino to print them for me free, called the Casablanca Casino.
Okay, sir, do you
So
mind
all
if I ask some
all I'm
questions?
saying is, I haven't heard a thing here yet. That's what I was waiting for. Why we should go to this? Nobody has said there's something wrong. If there's nothing wrong, why would you want to change it? Just for the sake of change.
It isn't for the sake of change, and I think that there are good reasons for making this change. If you give me a second here, and I think I can answer your question. And you know, I would be the first to say that, you know, Baltimore is probably not ruled very well, and in the next 2 years they will probably make a decision, perhaps to replace that mayor. But I can give you a pretty good example. For one thing, I mean, when we reach the size of New York, then I think we need to probably go back and look at the charter again. If you want to look at a city that does not run under a mayoral system at that level, when you're up here, and remember we're down here, but up here, as long as we're making these sort of hypothetical comparisons, take a look at Miami, probably one of the worst run cities in the United States, or its compadre on the West Coast, Los Angeles, another city without a real mayor. And what you have there is a conglomeration of small governmental units that are all fighting each other all the time, and have gotten to the point right now where they can't even replace LAX. I mean, the system is there. And what we're seeing now over the last few years here in Lakeland is the beginning of that kind of stasis, which served us really well when we were small. Stability, the stability that you're talking about, you know, which is critical when you're not moving anywhere. But when you begin to grow, decisions have to be made. And decisions are very difficult to come to when you have 7-person commissions, all with very different sorts of agendas and no real leadership. We have 2 good leaders in this room, in Gal Fields and Howard Wiggs. But neither one of these people were able to impose their will on the commission in any sort of visionary sort of way. We need to go this way, or we need to go that way. Their power of persuasion, fortunately for the city of Lakeland in both cases, has been very good. And they've been able to persuade the commission into certain types of decisions that they've made over the last few years. But we're reaching a point now where we need to give the people the right to choose the vision of Lakeland going forward, perhaps between a couple of different candidates, and not simply leave it to administrators.
Well, I mean, you know, if we're going to, I think one of the key examples of this is, and Howard and Gal are both in the room, and so, but their mayoral election 18 months ago, or whatever happened, was very clearly played out along the lines of replacing. I mean, we had a terrible police scare, and no one in this room will deny that, right? I mean, except maybe you, but I mean, no one else will deny we had a terrible police scandal, right? Is there?
It had nothing to do with doing their job.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So
resolving it turned out to be a tremendous problem,
and it went on for months. Nobody could make a decision. Howard ran on replacing the city manager and replacing the police chief. He won 53-47, but a pretty clear win, but it was close. And then nothing happened. Like 6 months later, the chief did something else, and they finally decided to leave her, to let her go. But nothing else happened to anyone. And as someone who lives here and wants to live here for the rest of my life, the inability to vote for a direction and have that direction followed is incredibly frustrating. And it's discouraging to voter participation. You see right now, no one wants to run for city commission. That's one of the huge problems we have right now. We can't get anybody to run. Same-sex benefits was, you know, everybody gnashing of teeth and yelling and screaming and all of this. And the key votes in that were Don Sellers on one side and Edie Yates on the other. And they both ran unopposed. It was utterly meaningless. The big political fight we had no political repercussions either way for them. That's when your politics is your structure is broken. I think when there's no tie between political intensity and anything that actually happens. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
we've got another question back here. Maybe we should.
I don't, this can turn into a debate, now. And I take it as a given that we all care about the city, that we all have the best of intentions, that the staff is competent, that our city commissioners ran because they thought they could affect change and are trying. I have some thoughts as to why that's not happening, but the problem is how to fix it, okay? Do we just massage the current system, elect different commissioners, or raise hell with the commissioners we've got, or put some pressure on city management, or tweak the system, or a more radical approach? And I'm initially very interested, personally, in a strong mayor, but I care. I don't want to make a mistake, okay? I think we're all here, and we care. So I'd like to hear, one, some of the problems that might happen, and are there alternative ways to deal with this situation other than a strong mayor? So, so as you said, it's a question answer, so informational. So I'm looking for, are there other ways this has been dealt with? Are there other catastrophes? And you just touched on the third point that it always comes down to, is who, it depends on who you elect. And whether we really have the deep pool here of talent to that sort of mayor. So, I believe in it when it works. I've watched my brother 25 years in Chattanooga. I just saw a strong mayor speak. He's amazing. But, he's got an undergraduate from Stanford, a law degree from the University of Chicago, and he's going on to bigger and better things. I know we have people that smart in this town, but whether they're going to put themselves out there. So back to my question rather than debate. Alternatives of tweaking and the downside.
Let me talk for just a second about and play devil's advocate, as it were. Systemic solutions should always be sort of the last resort in my way of thinking, because unless you have radical change already taking place, whether it's economic or you've got population shift or drain of resources or new resources, whatever it is, most of the time a current system with the right citizen backing and interest and so on and so forth can be made to work. And it's only under certain kinds of conditions, and I think in this case, obviously, I think we've reached those conditions, do you look to systemic change. Systemic change is going to, should it take place here in Lakeland, a strong mayor, for one thing, you can end up with a lousy one. That's the fact of the matter. That's the roll of the dice that you've always got to make in a democracy. The wrong person gets elected, or you get a crook in office, or something along those lines. And this gentleman was talking about some of the big cities, and we remember the party machines and the power grabs and all the people that are in somebody's pocket and all this kind of thing. You can't elect people like that, and they can cause you endless pain and agony. And they're very difficult to get rid of. One of the things about electing someone to office is that you're stuck with them for a while. And very often the process that may be built into the charter for getting rid of them takes as long as it might take if you just waited until the next election came along and they just faded off into the distance anyway. So that's the major problem. The other is that, let's face it, a mayor elected from the population of Lakeland is not going to have the technical expertise that a city manager is going to have in running administrative departments. It means that their selection of administrative department heads has got to be spot on, and it's got to be vetted by the commission. It has to be, because if you don't, then you could end up with a crony sort of a situation where they're putting all their buddies in charge of everything. You don't want a situation like that, because what it means is that the talent isn't rising to the top. It's simply you're electing a gang of people that are taking advantage of the city and running it into the ground. Now, that would be the second big, sort of devil's advocacy point I would make. There are ways of avoiding that, and there are ways of avoiding it legally, and there are ways of avoiding it sort of culturally. I think the culture of Lakeland is one of good faith and all of that. But we have to be aware of those kinds of possibilities.
And
you asked me to play devil's advocate, so those are my major concerns.
Or are there other tweakings in the plan?
There are. One would be a mayor aldermanic system, for example. This gentleman mentioned Chicago, and Chicago, for all of the problems that Chicago has had over the last 160 years, the bottom line is that Chicago is still a pretty healthy city. They're doing well. If you're in comparison to some of the other Rust Belt places, Pittsburgh that went through this gigantic change and gigantic, disjointed whatever over the last 50 years. Detroit, and if you're looking for a city that doesn't work, that's a good example of a city that doesn't. Chicago has always worked pretty well, and it's worked pretty well because its
if you're looking for something that looks a little like a commission there, it's their aldermen. The aldermen are elected from neighborhoods, and they represent, without any, sweat or agony or anything else, those people and no one else. They act like a legislature. They are elected in single-member districts from those communities of interest, and the communities of interest in Chicago, as they change, those districts have changed, the automatic districts. And they act.
For instance, Jacksonville, an example, Jacksonville, Florida, an example.
I'm not familiar enough with Jacksonville to say, but Chicago's example is the one that's usually put up by the Urban League and some others as sort of an example of representative government in action. But they also elect an extremely strong mayor, and that mayor is in charge of the city departments and hiring and firing in the city departments and so on and so forth. The aldermen have very little to do with that, although they can cut off his or her budget, and have in the past. So that's another possible alternative. It's not one that I would think would be one that would be all that useful here in Lakeland. For one thing, I mean, you might look at the single-member district thing. I think that has an important role perhaps down the line. But if you're looking at an actual legislature, does it make sense to bring together the equivalent of 30 people as opposed to 7 and have them sit down and hash things out over an ordinance? Or are you at an even greater state of gridlock?
Real quick, guys, one other sort of devil's advocate thing I would throw out that's important to think about as you think about this. The strong mayor is going to be elected probably with 11,000 votes, somewhere around in there. I'm sorry, fewer than that. It's going to be the total election is going to be 11,000, 12,000 votes, right?
What you're talking about are past elections, and I think one of the things that would fall out of a system like this one is a lot greater interest in the mayoral races and the commission races. You're going to have a lot greater investment of the citizens in Lakeland in the outcome, because currently the outcome is almost meaningless. I mean, I hate to say it, but except in terms of power to persuade and power to sit down and try and hash out deals, really there's no explicit way to put that vision into reality.
But even if this does drive higher turnout, this is going to reward organization. If you're in a union, if you're maybe a teachers union or like an electric union, that's the kind of thing that you might want to look for, because I think organized groups, much more than money in an election of this size, is going to have kind of a built-in, advantage, whatever you want to call it. So I think that's either a good side or a bad side, kind of depending on where you stand. But organized blocks will have a significant impact on this election, I would say. So.
Somebody in the back there says, yes, sir.
Yeah, I think probably the last time the charter was amended was a term limits ordinance that I had brought to the commission maybe 16 years ago. And one thing I can tell you, I'm all for you, and I just want to do everything I can to help you. That's straight up. But this issue of term limits, when I was approaching that, I did a lot of study about that. If you attach term limits to this, you will not lose. I did a lot of research and found out that when term limits is on the ballot, when the people have a chance to choose it, they never choose anything else. 100% of the time, when term limits are available to the voters, they choose it. And I think that it would be an effective part. Now, I've always been an age enough advocate, but I think it would be a really good tool for you as part of your trying to press this through to get the public's attention. The public may not clearly understand this difference between an elected and a city manager, but I promise you they will clearly understand that these people can only be here for 8 years. They're going to get that no one's going to be able to put so much power around themselves, because in 8 years they got to give it up, and it's going to go to somebody else. And that means a lot to the average person, because a lot of people think this is a method that corrupts the system. This is a method to make the rich people more powerful. And if you include term limits, the public will understand that no one's going to garner very much of that power for very long. they're gonna have to give it up in no more than 8 years.
I think that's a good point. I just, in fact, just speaking for me personally, I'm a lot more comfortable with term limits in the executive than I am in the legislative. So, I mean, I would probably be in support of that, but that's just me speaking.
I just want to mention a couple of things for those that think nothing's ever gone wrong in Lakeland, but I don't know if anybody remembers, we were paying hundreds of millions of dollars for a gas contract that was signed. We're paying $15 a thousand cubic feet for gas when we're selling it for $5. There was no escape clause in that contract, which should have been there. Any contract that was by anybody with a brain has an escape clause in it. That was signed by the city manager. It went to the manager of Lakeland Electric, attorneys, and the engineers at Lakeland Electric. So, yeah, it's wonderful. They're just all doing everything right. And then the thing with the sex scandal was bad enough. That went on for a long time. Then it was all covered up, and they wouldn't release the grand jury report and all that stuff. So that's just a little. Those are big things. They attached a fuel charge to our electric bill, a special fuel charge that was expensive, to make up this $100 million they were losing on this ridiculous contract that they should have said when it got to $750 or something like that, is null and void the whole contract. But nobody, and these great attorneys, highly paid attorneys, and then you said, you know, if you have a mayor, you might get the cronyism. I think there's some cronyism now. It was a while ago, just a couple of months ago, EDA said in a televised meeting that they've had the same audit firm for 25 years. Now, that's not an appropriate thing. You're supposed to rotate audit firms. If you don't rotate audit firms, you get too familiar and they don't have professional skepticism to do their job right. You know each other so well, you can get soft reporting or you can redirect people away from, or they can call something like a material weakness that's a significant deficiency, which maybe brings more attention to you from the state government or the federal government that you're getting grants from. So there's a lot of things wrong. There's some cronyism going on. There's all kinds of things going on here. And there's a lot of people with highly paid jobs. And even if they're not outside, I call that cronyism too. You're buying their loyalty with highly paid jobs. There's a lot of them in the city. A lot of them for a city of 100,000. So what you're buying is their loyalty.
The kinds of problems that you're talking about, signing of contracts, you know, positioning the city to deal with a scandal like the one that we had last summer, and so on and so forth. It's different. If you're an unelected official, if you've simply been appointed and you have an ironclad job, how you deal with that problem than if you have to own it. If you're invested in those problems, if you have to answer to the people of Lakeland directly as an elected official and say, here's why I did this, here's why I signed this lousy contract, and defend it in front of the people of Lakeland, you're going to think twice about signing a contract like that to begin with. If the question is raised about transparency in city government and you don't have a good answer for it and you're an elected official, you're not going to last long. The bottom line is that if you are a hireling, if you're a bureaucrat, if you're an administrator that's been brought on under a paycheck, you can make decisions like that without getting out of bed.
No one lost their job for that contract. And all the people that didn't think it, and I'm not an attorney, but you couldn't have passed that under my nose without asking for an escape clause. I've seen enough business contracts that you put that in there so you don't have a bludgeon over your head.
No, it's those kinds of decisions that are difficult to make if you're an elected official, and you've got to think them all the way through, not halfway through.
You know, we're not going to bash city officials. I mean, there's a lot of good things that have been done.
Well, Mr. Dietrich said nothing
about
I'm talking about we.
I think I expressed it to him. But so I mean, the larger point I'm trying to say is when you have a large organization that sort of acts as its own branch of government and isn't very accountable to the public because of the way of the structure functioning, even very good, well-meaning people can find themselves caught in incentives they don't even recognize until it's on them. I think the fire fee is a classic example of this. I understand why they did that. I mean, it's what can we do that's going to solve our problem? We've got X amount of money problem. We want to try to solve that problem. Staff didn't have to think politically. Staff thought administratively, and as a result, we wasted 6 months on an idea that was never popular and was, it's debatable whether it was even good policy. What's not debatable is if we had an elected mayor at the time who was powerful, that the whole tenor of that would have been a different thing. It was driven by administration, not solving the political problem they had.
When
if
there
that makes
aren't
sense.
systemic blocks to bureaucracy, bureaucrats will do as bureaucrats do. They do their jobs. We have some really good ones in Lakeland. Fortunately, we have some really good people running departments. We have good departments here. As this gentleman pointed out a while ago, it's hard to find, a lot of flaw in this, despite the scandal and so on and so forth. You can't blame the bureaucracy for not having a counterweight. You can't blame the administrators for not having people that oversee them properly. You can't. They don't have a political sense. They're not paid to have a political sense. They're paid to do things like put in manholes. Bottom line. And if that means 50 manholes or 30 manholes, they don't make that decision unless they're forced to, unless they're in a position where they are making those decisions because no one else is enabled to do so. And what we're trying to do is to build in a political element that's answerable to the people of Lakeland to make those kinds of decisions.
Yes, somebody had a question back there. Yes.
Manager? I mean, does the city manager serve at the pleasure of the city council, or how does you call it the city council?
The current city manager serves at the discretion of 4 votes on the city commission. If a majority of the city commission wants to fire the city commissioner, the city manager today, they can do it. Now, there are things built into that. A city manager can have a very difficult contract to deal with, and appointed one. You may have to pay him or her $500,000 for 6 months, or however much. There's a lot of things. It's not just that their contract is dealt with at the discretion of the city commission, but an executive elected mayor, which would essentially be an elected city manager, will have no contract. His or her only contract will be with the people that elect them.
But the central problem here is not that kind of accountability. Firing a city manager is a nuclear option. What you're doing is you're saying you've made 1 or 2 bad decisions, we're going to get rid of you. And what you get is a rotating chair, if that's the way that you're dealing with. If the best way to kill the ant is to go after it with an atom bomb, you're going to have a lot of atom bombs and very few ants. And the bottom line is that I don't think that we've had, in the city manager's office over the last 5 years or so, I don't think we've had anything that would rise to the level of that kind of incompetence. I really don't. I have issues with some of the things that have happened in that office, but the bottom line is that it's not really that person's fault, or that the person that occupies that position's fault, that the commission doesn't fire them. Because if that's all the commission can do in terms of guiding that person in that position, then there's something wrong with the position, not with the person. And what we're advocating is a position that has to be responsive to not only to the commission, but also indirectly to the people of Lakeland every time they come up for election. And that means that you get discussion on the 30 manhole covers or the 50 manhole covers or the special water district or whatever it is that person has to answer to. Currently, if the only thing we can do with the city manager in order to discipline the city manager is to fire them, that doesn't sound like a very efficient system.
Well, and it also means that every interaction a citizen has with the staff function of government is, in a sense, an act of politics. So there's going to be much more of a customer service sense. I think the city has a reputation for not having a great customer service sense. Those are subjective things. If you want to drive it in the direction of customer service, make the person in charge of the organization much more directly answerable to his or her customers.
Mayor Fields?
Yes.
I have a question. Mr. Townsend, when you were using the fire fee as an example of city manager making a decision bureaucratically and not thinking politically, Is that because you thought it was the city manager's decision to go forward with fire fee?
I think I said staff, but as my understanding was the idea bubbled up from staff because there was there was an X financial problem to deal with.
Is it your belief that the city manager went forward with it without the commission telling them to?
No, that was not. But it is my belief that the city manager position has a lot of influence on what the city commission does.
The way you described it, though, you made it seem as though staff made a decision to go forward and do something, and there was no political consideration on the policy call whatsoever.
Well, if I said it too directly, I apologize. There's obviously not a political sense because we spent 6 months doing something that was never popular and then fell apart at the last minute.
Jim, did you?
Yeah, I'll answer that directly. The commission voted to go forward with the fire fee. And we did it looking at options on how we would finance our local government and the reasons that we thought it was a good idea. I will tell you though, and I know the mayor and I have to be careful about interacting here, but there is very little political discussion at the Lakeland City meetings or at the agenda study meetings. Our system that we've adopted over the years on how Lakeland is run does not allow for big policy discussions and making fundamental shifts and how you drive a city forward with a vision requires, in the current system, is very difficult to do. It's difficult to do because we have 7 people, you have to get 4 votes. With our open government law, and I'm not going to bash that, but it makes it very difficult to throw out an idea, and if it's a stupid idea, you get beat up for it. If it's a really great idea, but one person is against it, you get beat up for it, let alone if Chris likes it or not. But, yeah, I'm just kidding. But, it's hard in that environment to be visionary, to say, we want to drive the city forward. How do we do that? I will tell you that I support the idea of an executive mayor or a strong mayor. For one, I grew up in the city of Indianapolis, which was a city that was dying in the 60s and 70s. We elected a series of mayors who were excellent mayors. First one was Richard Lugar, who became Senator Lugar. And then for 20 some odd years we had Richard Hudnut, who was a Presbyterian minister, and most of us were scared to death of him when he was elected. I worked for the city then. But he turned out to be a brilliant visionary about what the city could be. And what's missing in Lakeland to some degree, although we have hundreds of documents that talk about vision, is really somebody driving a unified vision for the city. I will tell you right now, there are at least 7 visions for the cities on the dais. There's Tim McCausland, there's Doug Thomas's, and then there's a bunch of citizens out in the city that represent different groups of people who have different visions for the city. There's not a single vision for the city of Lakeland. The second concern I have is how do you drive Lakeland forward? I think Lakeland has done a lot of really good things, but at times we've taken pauses. We did something great, then we paused and we lost momentum is what I've seen. And I think a lot of cities into the future that are going to flourish and going to be the cities that we say we want to be are going to have to move faster than the incremental approaches that the Lakeland current government that we have in Lakeland has set out delivers. It's very incremental thinking, it's small thinking, and it's not how do we go from here to here, it's how do I go this inch, and it's protecting our butts, quite frankly, and it's also that it's hard just to drive that vision forward and take the risk of putting out a big vision.
And it is
and I'm the new guy on the block. That's just what I've learned in the last 18 months.
But I think that most of us that have been, have watched city government over the last, decade or so would probably agree with you. And it's not because of the people that are in these positions. You've got some bright, energetic people with lots of great ideas on all sides on that commission. But none of them have been able to really translate them into the kinds of things that they have envisioned. And what we see, I think, is an element of real frustration on the part of the people that occupy those positions. And they become frustrated and they're reduced to incremental movement. And that means that you don't get that united vision because everything militates against it. systemically it militates against it.
Can we stay with Jim for just a second? Jim, they got the city town hall tomorrow night. What's your vision for how this plays out? Because this could be a parallel effort, or it could be how might we merge the efforts? Tell me how you would like to see this go.
Well, I produced a document that the commission voted on 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, that kind of outlines that I thought that the commission needed to hold a series of meetings. That one would be educational. What does our existing charter say? Who's in charge? What does it do? Really help the public, and even to some degree the commissioners understand it from an honest discussion about what the charter means and what it does. And then a series of meetings where we could have a panel discussion and saying, and this would be all city commission staff driven, maybe a group that's very supportive of bringing 2 or 3 strong mayors, or maybe a city manager who works under a strong mayor kind of thing, and say these are the good things that come from the strong mayor, these are some of the weaknesses, some things to watch out for. And then we would have panel discussions and say, let's have the other side of that. What's some of the issues with, what's the benefits of the strong city manager form? And then come forward and say, are there changes to, we'd have, I call it a come to Jesus meeting, where you'd say, do we need to make changes? Do we want to stay with a strong city manager, but make some fundamental changes to our charter that puts some more authority into the hands of the city commission? For example, should the city commission vote to confirm the appointment of the police chief, we then have a dog in the fight if that police chief is successful or not successful. And if the police chief does something wrong, then I have a dog in the fight because I voted for that person. I can go to the manager and say, wait a minute, we need to hold this person accountable. Right now, I don't have, according to the charter, as a city commissioner, I have very limited things I can say about personnel without violating the charter. So that's one thing. The other thing that we would do in the commission then would come to a point saying, do we make changes to the charter, or do we want to support a new charter that would support the strong mayor? And that, we had that discussion and a vote. We would eventually have to produce the charter amendments and vote on it as a city commission to put it forward to the voters.
What's the timeline for that? Just I mean, without holding you to it specifically, but could you see your come to Jesus meeting by New Year? Or what do you have in mind?
Optimistically, January. I would say from the standpoint of we're in the middle of we're in the middle of all the things to keep us from being aggressive on things, the budget and now rewriting it and things like that. We're going to have obviously a big discussion through September with the budget, and then you're into the holidays. So I'm going to guess it would be in a purgatory of January. I don't see, and I never thought that this could occur in November from any standpoint, because the public has got to have an opportunity to come and say, A, we want to change, and then B, what does that change look like? To me, the bigger, it's a huge question, strong mayor, not strong mayor. This next answer is more important to me is what form of strong mayor government do you choose? Do you choose Tampa? Do you choose Orlando? Do you choose Chattanooga? What restrictions do you put on the power of the mayor that are vested in the power of the city council? What powers are vested in the city council to bring in the mayor? That balance of power is important. People talk about cronyism and all these problems. I go, yeah, well, Mr. Ford up in Toronto was doing crack cocaine in the chambers, and the city of Toronto survived. Okay, Washington D.C. survived Marion Barry. So, but that's because you had a balance of power. You have to have that balance to make either system work. And I will say right now, I think that the contract for Mr. Thomas and the way the charter is written makes it difficult to change.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
He's not done.
I'm done.
Okay. The timing for this, I would like to encourage you to do this at the presidential election. You are going to be much more likely to succeed in this. Unfortunately, we made this very bad decision to move our city commission races to these off time. In my opinion, you essentially wiped out a big part, the vast majority of people who would go vote for city commissions, and you have put way more power now in the hands of the most politically active and influential people. So I think that you'll have a better success at it if you take it in the general election. And one other thing I would recommend, I think that sometime before the end of this year, you should take this initiative, whatever you finally determine it to be, to the city commission and give them the opportunity to vote on it yes or no. Because when they say no, then you can go to the public and say, we tried. We tried to work with them and they said no. We're here because there's no other alternative. And I think that the public will understand and respect that position better than the rich guy who's in the matter of the public family is going to support that is better for rich people. Because I got to tell you, that's going to be the angle from the people who are against this. So my opinion is, gear this thing up so it lands on the presidential election, or at least in the primaries.
Matt, are we sort of talking about this November?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit because I think that I've gotten that question as I've had a lot of discussions. When should this election take place? And the theme to our approach has been we want to keep as many options open as we can. There was an appetite very clearly expressed by some people to vote on this as soon as possible, and the next election is this year, November. There's other people who have said the very same thing you did, the presidential primary maybe, or a special election, something to that effect. So I think the thing, and Commissioner Meless kind of described a similar sentiment, is you want to get it right. You don't want to just rush everything together and slap something together, and maybe you end up with what St. Petersburg ended up with, where they had an amendment that passed, but it didn't really fully contemplate all the ramifications. So, without really saying yes, March makes sense, or yes, next year makes sense, or this year makes sense, or anything like that, I think that the theme is get it right, and then give the people the chance to vote on it, whatever timing that is, whatever however that unfolds. And your point is very well taken as far as the election goes. There are a lot of municipalities throughout the state who hold their elections on kind of an off cycle. The theme there, I think, is to give people the opportunity to focus on their own election, to sort of focus on their own city. It alleviates some of the burden that the supervisor of elections has to take on. But you're exactly right. What it usually equals is lower turnout, in some cases dramatically lower turnout.
This is a populist movement. And we want, all of us that believe in this, we want as many people to the polls as we can possibly get. Because if you put this at an off time, the people who are advantaged the most by the system the way it is now will come out in force, and the average people will not think of it, will not be aware of it, will not tune to it. But if you do two things, you put this on the vote at a presidential election, and you include term limits in that, this thing will win big.
I take your strategic point, but I think Matt's right. I think part of what we're trying to do here is to make sure that we get it right, and that means getting it right for all the people of Lakeland and not just some of them. And that means a lot more public discussion, a lot more clarification of the issues, perhaps taking advantage of some of Jim's things here with these meetings and so on. I mean, there's a lot to be talked about here, because if this is going to be something that lasts for a while, then it's got to have most of the burrs taken off before it goes through the vent of public opinion.
Joe, let's talk to that, Joe.
Well, first let me say, as the high-priced city attorney that was sitting in the seat when the gas contract was passed, I should probably spend some time defending myself. But I'll leave that for another day, other than to say it wasn't that high price of job back then. So that's that.
It was
Yeah, we can discuss that later. I heard the comment made that the only way you can discipline an appointed city manager is to fire him.
So that isn't what I said. What I said is if that is the only way, if that's the only apparent way to discipline a city manager, then it should never be used. And what that means is that you have to have a perfect selection of the city manager that is flawless in every way. I don't know where you find something like that. It would be great to have one, I guess.
Well, how do you? Then let me ask. The reason I brought that up is how you discipline elected mayor.
you fire them in polls.
With a 4-year gap in between?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 4-year gap. But if you look at the serving city managers in some cities, they've been there for 30 or 40 years.
And the state of Florida provides a recall of municipally elected
Elections
officials.
have actually been used with great effect.
In extreme cases, you have to have even power
If somebody
recall.
that's a crook, then you've got to.
But let me ask another question. Dr. Anderson, you mentioned unelected buffers earlier. Who are you referring to? Department heads? Who in the administration is the unelected buffers that we will remove with an elected?
The way that I think about this is that if I'm somebody that's trying to get, a building permit or a special district set up or something like that, and I go to a city office, I know, going in, the city office answers to the city manager, who is not elected. And that if the person on the ground is not, animated by political concerns, that, if I don't get the things that I want, I'm going to take another route. I'm going to go to the mayor's office, or I'm going to go to the commission, or, the legislative branch and the executive branch, and put the push on. That's a little different than saying I'm going to go talk to the guy in the city manager's office, who frankly doesn't have an investment, not a direct investment, not a seeable investment in seeing my thing through. The mayor does, because that's it. And then I get angry and I go out and I do what that gentleman did back there and pass my own, whatever it is, in his case term limits. I pass something against the city, or I try and get the mayor removed, or or whatever. But currently, as a citizen, I don't have any control over any of that. And those are unelected buffers between me and the source of the power. And the source of the power has got to be the people of Lakeland. People of Lakeland can't come together as a group and say, like ancient Athens or something, and say, well, I think we should give them a special sewer district. But what they can do is elect a mayor who can make those kinds of decisions at the top if necessary, and look into a matter that maybe has arisen in controversy within an agency.
And just set priorities that might be, the city's a big organization full of people working very hard. I know many of them. It's all organizations like that will lapse into transactionalism. I've got to do X to keep the trains running each day. I've got 45 things to do. The thing you're coming to talk to me about, unless you have some sort of power to make me focus on it, it's not that I don't respect you, or I've got 45 other things to do, and that was sort of the point I was trying to make about the fire fee. Is the fire fee was an administrative solution to a political problem, and rather than have that real free for all discussion that an elected mayor would have through a campaign, it got done, in the boardrooms there, and I think it was actually easy administratively. It was very hard politically, but administratively it was very easy to do. It's hard to get big complex efforts moving administratively if you don't have political power pushing on them.
I just, from my own experience working with department heads and staff on all levels over the years, I never have experienced that where they were not out to do the right thing.
Oh, no,
that's not what I said. No.
They are personally concerned. They're also citizens of Lakeland. They also want to see, but they don't have an agenda that's been set for them other than their own job. In other words, there's no sort of vision coming from the office of the mayor or from the commission or something like that says, here are the most important things that we need to be doing. It's coming from an unelected
and they're also experts in their fields, so they're going to have a very natural point of view on things. And the longer they're in those positions, the more expert they get. And a lot of times you've got to be careful with experts. Things become too obvious to them. Things that it's a human nature, I think. If there's not some kind of outside force to keep them continually considering new ideas, we just kind of do the same thing.
I think what Mr. Mulwiney was trying to tell you is from the perspective of someone who's been in the seat, that it works much better than what you're describing.
Well, I would not be surprised that he would say that. No offense to Joe.
I'm not defending it. I wasn't administration when I was with the city anyway. I didn't do the city attorney's office. That's that. But I'll tell you this, within the city, both as an outsider who goes to the city with projects and with clients who have projects, and as an insider who got to see it happen, good ideas thrive and succeed. I've never seen that fail. And I didn't see them get strung up and hogtied in administrative or non-political considerations.
The problem is that good ideas are not objectively findable. Good ideas are a political decision as to what's good and what's not. They're an agenda. And what's good for one person may not be good for someone else. And when you're in a position of administration, you have to make an objective decision about what is good. And that's guided not by a political consideration, but rather by your own expertise in your own narrow area. And the longer you're in that position, the more likely you are to make decisions in a sort of a knee-jerk way based on that experience rather than on the considerations of other agendas. That gentleman back there in green had a question, and I've been kind of avoiding you for some time.
Sorry. Well, I can't see it.
Lash out.
I can't see it. Joe's head's right there in the middle.
Just changing slightly different area. When you're talking about changing the charter, currently you're talking about having so many at large and so many that are assigned to districts. I grew up in a town that you had your alderman, and you didn't have any at large commissioners at all, aldermen. They were all assigned to a district, and you knew your guy, and if you needed to go talk to somebody about something in the local politics, city politics, you talk to him. So what's the advantage of having at-large versus having everyone assigned to a district, and you elect a guy from your district?
You're probably going to
Since you're changing the charter anyway,
you're probably going to hear a range of opinions up here. Editorially, and only coming from my position as a political scientist who believes in representation probably before efficiency, you're never going to find a voice in me that's going to support at-large seating. I think at-large seats are a scam, frankly. Having said this in such a gentle way, I'll let someone else.
I can tell you, I was at a meeting at the Paul A. Diggs neighborhood committee last week, and they were very interested in single-member districts, and I think that's something we're going to have to think about.
Communities of interest,
right,
neighborhoods,
right.
It's your couple of streets, the people you know in your neighborhood and so on. As the city gets bigger, those kinds of small elements like that become bigger and become far more important.
Right. I'll come back to you, but I just want to make sure if there's somebody we hadn't called on yet who had a question. I'll go to John and then you.
I just had a comment when Mr. Henderson was talking about, and I might have misunderstood you, but you seem to be saying that the bureaucrat is going to make a more objective decision than a politically motivated person such as the elected mayor. Did I misunderstand that?
You did, because it is objective only in that it furthers the bureaucracy's agenda. It ignores other agendas. Everybody's got an agenda.
Yeah, there's no such thing as objectivity.
I guess I'm naive enough then to think that we're electing our city officials to act in our best interest, whether they're representing a district or at large or whatever.
Exactly.
And I think that has been the case in the past. And further, I personally think that a robust discussion is great. And I've learned a lot more than I knew coming in about the strong mayor. But I still think, as a business person, that I would rather have a business person running a corporation that exceeds $500 million in its annual budget. I'm not sure what the city's budget is, but it's a large budget, where when we had the elected superintendent that was brought up before, I moved from out of state to Florida when they had an elected superintendent, and I couldn't believe it, because I think there were 3 requirements. You had to be 18, you had to be an American citizen, and you had to be a high school graduate. I think those were the 3 requirements for the superintendent of schools. I thought that was unbelievable. So now we're talking about electing a strong mayor who would head up our community with arguably little or no experience running a large corporation, let alone being familiar with the regulatory issues that you have to deal with, from the utility on the one hand to the Parks and Recreations Department on the other hand. I can't grasp, I can't support that.
Bottom line is that I don't want the CEO of Microsoft working on my computer, because I know the CEO of Microsoft doesn't know anything about my computer.
I think if you have a CEO who's getting that deep into the weeds, you got a bigger problem. And I don't think we've got that problem with our city commission.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you were next.
All the way
Sorry.
in the back.
Sorry.
Well, Patrick Jones, I'm sorry. As a radio host in Tampa, I talk to a lot of people from Tampa, Lakeland. Lakeland's a very beautiful thing. I support it and everything. But we're trying to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to do this. This isn't the trial of Socrates here. If the guy screwed up, fire him, get somebody else. When does this contract end? Nobody know? Good. You're trying to reinvent the wheel. Don't do that. We have excellent people on the staff right now, and if you can't do that, my biggest question and fear is this a preempt if we start having something like this because they put the sale of Lakeland Electric on the back burner? Is this a way to kind of circumvent and put Lakeland Electric sell back on the
I can tell you that. I personally will fight to the death to keep Lakeland Electric from being sold.
You know that's going to be.
Oh yeah, that's. I mean that's the. I mean, and I'm not sure. Explain to me how an elected mayor would make that more likely to happen.
With the sale of Lakeland
Yeah.
Electric.
Yeah, explain that to me.
It could be put on the agenda over and over. But the thing
Well,
is-
it was put on the agenda already and beaten soundly.
So you don't think it's going to come back up?
It can't happen without a vote, without a referendum. It cannot be sold without a referendum of the city. So it's not possible, and it makes no
Oh, no, I
difference.
don't think you can.
It makes no difference whether the mayor is elected or appointed. They have no power to control that.
I'm just saying you have to look at your motivation, what's going on. People need if you have balls to stand up and do something, do the right thing. You know the right thing and the wrong thing, do the right thing. If a man did a wrong job and you want to get rid of him, by God and high water, get rid of him, move on, and let's make Lakeland a beautiful place like it should be. What do you do,
Well, it's not about getting rid of any particular person. So
Sorry, if you feel like he's doing a bad job, people need to step up.
again, but it's not about. This is not about getting rid of a particular person.
I don't.
I mean,
I don't.
I mean, you may not believe that, but it's not. So sorry, Bruce.
Yeah, I'm not making the connection here. Are you talking about the city manager?
The city manager, Doug Thomas.
Again, I don't think that necessarily that Mr. Thomas is a bad city manager. I think he probably is a pretty good one. His command of the budget stuff, I think, is pretty good. For example, I don't think anybody has any issues with that. But I do think that he's in a trap of his own position. He's not in a place where he can make the kinds of decisions that you have to make to get Lakeland to move forward because he's not elected by the city of Lakeland. And it would not surprise me to find somebody very similar to, a Mr. Thomas or some other people that are coming from the business community that might emerge as really strong mayoral candidates for this position. And I think allowing the people of Lakeland to make those kinds of decisions, your argument, for example, about putting somebody in that knows what the hell they're doing might be a very strong argument for electing. It is certainly elected officials all over the country in one way or another. People from business now make up better than half the Congress. Why? Because they've made exactly the argument that you're making. And there's no reason why a person could not.
I think if Elaine Thompson was running Lakeland Regional Medical Center to the ground, they would get rid of Elaine Thompson.
I don't get the connection.
Yeah,
We're not talking about a badly run city. We're talking about a city that is not able to move forward into sort of a future agenda.
This is the way to move forward.
In this, I agree with this gentleman, and that is that Lakeland's a pretty darn good place to live, largely because of the way that it has been run. But I think what we're facing is a future crisis. We're getting to the point now where we're hitting that tipping point where if we don't make some changes and relatively quickly, and that doesn't mean hold the election tomorrow, But, relatively quickly, then we're going to find ourselves in a position where we cannot be as nimble or as flexible as we need to be to deal with the challenges that Lakeland very shortly is going to be facing.
And I do think we're underachieving a bit. I mean, relative to I love the city plan to die in my house, which is right down the street.
Can't be buried though.
Soon. Or not. I'm sorry, not soon. But I think because of the structural advantage of Lakeland Electric, I think because of a lot of the structural advantages of our geography, we have a lot going for us that we are not exploiting as well as we could if we had a more responsive political structure. And that's kind of an argument for taking a modified gamble on this, because we have such a, we're kind of muddling through pretty well now. If we want to get to the next level, the downside is not as large as the upside is good. Is my position.
Doesn't the elected mayor then select basically the county manager, the
right.
CEO?
Right. They would select
it. Do you have to have 4 votes to approve it of the commission, basically?
Again, every city has a little bit of a different variation. We've gotten a lot of advice from other cities that a more efficient and effective way to do that would be to have that person simply hired by the mayor, and not have that position subject to confirmation. We've had other cities where their sort of example is to have that person be confirmed. 2 of the cities we talked to, their strong recommendation was to have the commission confirm the attorney and the city clerk and no one else. Now we, in the conversations we've had here, because we think Lakeland is pretty unique with the utility, we think that the general manager ought to work for the commission, not for the mayor, because that is such an important asset to the city. But your point, I mean, unfortunately, you've got blank slate, and you can kind of write it however you want to. I think the theme for us has been to lean in the direction of making as few changes as possible. So, as of right now, we're leaning in the direction that manager would just be hired by the mayor.
Right. And hopefully that person does a very good job administratively. Even if there's a new elector, a new mayor comes in, we'll retain that person. There'd be a lot of room for continuity.
But if the commissioners wanted to fire that person, could they say if they had either a supermajority or a plain majority, could they vote 4-3 or 6-1 to fire? I would think that would take some of the policy.
We haven't contemplated that particular scenario, but it's we'll make a note of it. That's an interesting idea.
I have 2 things. I want to say something to the professor. He said a while ago that there hasn't been any problems with the management of the city in the last 5 years or something like that.
No, I said I thought they were tolerable.
Yeah,
Every city.
but I would add this. We can't be sure that's the case because they've had the same auditing firm for 25 years. So I'm not joking. I mean, I'm not joking because we don't know how objective that work is and how transparent it is, and if everything that's hiding behind swept under the rug is coming out. And for that gentleman over there, he was worried about who's running the utility, but they had a general manager and assistant general managers and sub-general managers and make a heck of a lot of money, all these people, and they're running that thing, and I don't think they need a lot of help from the manager or the executive mayor. They run it because whatever, they ran that stuff with their engineers or whatever else, but there's quite a hierarchy of highly paid people over there running that, and the $500 million budget is not really a $500 million budget for the city manager. It's $450 million for the electric, which the general manager and all those people run, and it's about $100 million the general fund. That's pretty much what the city manager runs. He's not running Lakeland Electric. It's being run by a bunch of professionals over there that are skilled in that, and I don't know why that would change. And the mayor would have a smaller venue, which is about $100 million a budget. That's why that fire tax fee blew a giant hole in the budget, because it wasn't 8 out of $500 million. It was 8 out of $107 million or something like that. That's why it was a big blow through their budget. And then somebody said here they had to think of it administratively, and they thought of that. They thought of the revenues, but they didn't think of cutting the spending. That was another administrative solution nobody considered when they were doing their thinking.
Well, hey guys, we're at 10 minutes till 8. I had no idea this would go on for this long. I'm very, very pleased with that. Thank you, everybody. Don't want to cut anybody off, but I do want to make sure we tell you, please stay and give us your email addresses or contact info if any of you want to stay sort of in the loop. We'd love to get ways to keep you involved. So, Jeff, sorry.
Yeah, just I invite everybody that tomorrow evening is the City Commission is holding their first meeting discussing this, and we'll have a gentleman from the National League of Cities. Civically, yeah. And we'll be talking about the various options for strong mayor and continuation of the city manager. There's a chance to be educated from the national viewpoint of the national speaker. And that's tomorrow at 6 in the City Commission chambers. Into commercials.
Yes, sir.
So there's a movement for an executive mayor. Is there any movement, comparable movement, to keep things the way they are? Is there an organized?
I think our friend Gene Strickland here in the front is a very good spokesman for the other side. Frank O'Reilly behind you in the pink shirt.
So the other side is organized equally well, or? I
think we are equally unorganized.
So are there any plans then to have debates on this between these two groups?
I don't know that we have formalized those plans, but I can tell you I'm happy to discuss this in front of anybody at any time. So, debate, discuss, whatever. It's fun. I like to talk about it.
How about from the other group? I mean, are there any plans on your part to propose actual debates?
I think we had one the other night.
But nothing official so far. I mean, are you talking to each other?
What we did was we went around to the Northwest section and spoke to the people, giving them the information on it. And Mr. Townsend got up and gave his side. And so it comes around. There'll be a lot of meetings. Anybody that wishes, has an organization that wishes to have someone speak to it, they're welcome to call any one of us.
Sure. I think at this point it'd be like punching a bowl of Jello. I mean,
right.
We're not hard and fast enough in terms of there's no concrete position up here. I don't know if we've made that clear. Part of the reason that we're having meetings like this is to get the kind of feedback that is necessary. The discussions of the formation of the commission and who does what in a veto situation. All these kinds of things are things that are not worked out yet.
Right.
And so I think once positions have hardened a bit, once there is something on the table that we can discuss, then I think at that point debates would be very much in order.
Yeah,
I'm not sure now's the time because I'm not sure we have anything to debate yet.
Right. It's more. I mean, it would look more like this, where we're kind of going back and forth and answering questions.
I would be absolutely. I'd be happy to talk this stuff through with any group.
Anybody that we haven't heard from? A little different take on things, different question. I want to make sure we hear from everybody. It's a good, lively discussion. I don't think anybody got a water, so
yeah,
it's your bonus.
Here, if you would like to be kept in communication, please write your name and email and phone number down if you'd like to.
Let's I'll give you
I'm sorry.
Bruce is actually done. Thanks for being there. I'll try and make it tomorrow night will be interesting.
Looks like you got the trip under control. Okay, the live stream is ending. Thank you for hanging in there.